Welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right into a genuinely fascinating crossover between our bodies and our minds today. We're going to be looking at the physical and mental adaptations that are absolutely crucial for long-term success. You know, we so often think of physical training and mental discipline as these two completely separate things, right? But the science actually reveals that they mirror each other in some incredibly surprising ways. As you'll see, they both rely on a very deep, enduring form of memory.
Okay, let's take a quick look at our agenda for today. We're covering 1. The biology of muscle memory. 2. Willpower as a muscle. 3. The moral licensing trap. 4. Why guilt fails us. And finally, 5. Strategies for lasting success.
I want to kick things off by throwing this question out to you. Why is regaining fitness so much easier than starting from scratch? Seriously, take a second to think about that. Have you ever noticed that if you take months or, even years off from the gym, rebuilding that lost muscle is significantly faster than it was to build it the very first time? It feels kind of like magic, but it's actually hard-coded right into our biology. Our bodies literally remember our hard work.
Let's start with Section 1, the biology of muscle memory and how our cells remember our efforts.
So muscle memory, it's not just a cute metaphor for, knowing how to ride a bike. It's a profound, structural, cellular reality. Let's zoom into the cellular level for a second. Muscle cells are highly unique. They're the largest cells in the mammalian body, literally thousands of times larger than most other cells. To support that massive volume, they actually contain multiple cell nuclei, making them what biologists call syncytia. Now, when you do strength training, your muscle tissue actually multiplies these nuclei. Think of myonuclei like factory workers. You hire more when demand is really high, right? But here's the kicker. When things slow down, you don't fire them. They just wait on standby. Research shows that even when you stop training and your muscle shrinks, those extra nuclei do not undergo apoptosis, meaning they don't self-destruct. They stick around. So when you finally head back to the gym, those extra myonuclei are already right there, ready to rapidly synthesize new proteins and build your muscle mass right back up.
But wait, what's truly fascinating here is that this memory extends all the way down to our DNA, and it's not just for heavy weightlifting either. A recent study put subjects through an 8-week high-intensity interval training or HIIT program, and what they found was that it created an epigenetic memory, an epi-memory. Even after 3 full months of total detraining, the subjects retained what's called DNA hypomethylation. In simple terms, the DNA uncoils and just stays primed to activate. Specifically, genes like SLC16A3 and INPP5A, which are super crucial for lactate transport and calcium signaling, were primed and ready to express at much higher levels. So basically, your DNA biologically prepares your body for future success based on the stress you put it through today. How cool is that?
Moving on to Section 2, willpower as a muscle and the psychology of self-control. Just as our physical muscle fibers adapt, grow, and remember, our minds operate on a remarkably similar framework when it comes to discipline. To really understand this, we're drawing heavily on Kelly McGonigal's brilliant framework from her book, The Willpower Instinct. She points out that self-control is a depletable but highly trainable resource. It's not just some fixed personality trait that you're either born with or you aren't. It literally functions like a muscle. When you use it, it gets tired. Every single time you control your temper, or resist a dessert, or stick to your monthly budget, you're actually drawing from the exact same energy reserve.
And this brings us to a really critical distinction: motivation versus discipline. Motivation is that initial fiery spark. It's this great emotional high tied to your deepest desires. But as we all know, motivation is notoriously fleeting. It fades. Discipline, on the other hand, is your unwavering anchor. It's the steady flame of habit building that takes over when that initial enthusiasm naturally wanes. Because your willpower muscle gets fatigued as the day goes on, you simply cannot rely on motivation alone. You're going to need discipline to bridge that gap.
McGonigal actually breaks self-control down into 3 distinct powers that we've got to actively harness. First up is I won't power. That's the ability to resist temptation, like saying no to a cigarette or a donut in the break room. Second is I will power. The ability to do what's hard, like, getting off the couch to exercise, even when Netflix is practically begging you to stay. But the third, and honestly the most important, is I want power. This is your ability to actively remember your deeper, long-term goals right in the heat of the moment. Harnessing all 3 of these together is how you really combat willpower exhaustion.
Which brings us to Section 3, the moral licensing trap, or why being good gives us permission to be bad. This quote brilliantly illustrates the psychological traps we tend to fall into once that willpower muscle gets fatigued. Read this with me. When you do something good, you feel good about yourself, which often means giving yourself permission to do something bad. This right here is the absolute core of moral licensing. Look, we aren't usually trying to be perfect, we just want to feel good enough. So say you totally crush a morning workout, right? Naturally, your brain chimes in and convinces you that you've earned a massive greasy pizza for dinner. Because you were good, you feel totally justified in self-sabotaging later.
And this trap actually extends to how we view our own progress. Now, making progress is inherently positive, right? Well, surprisingly, merely tracking your progress can actually hold you back if you use it to trigger that moral licensing. We've all been there. If you tell yourself, hey, I did good, I deserve a treat, you've fallen right into the trap. But if you shift your focus to your commitment to the goal itself, you reinforce your identity. You say, I did that because I want to reach my ultimate goal. Just that simple psychological shift keeps your willpower completely intact.
All right, Section 4, Why Guilt Fails Us and the Paradox of Shame and Self-Control.
So what happens when we inevitably fail to maintain our discipline? Because let's be real, we all slip up. Our first instinct is usually to beat ourselves up over it. And this brings us to what's known as the what the hell effect. When you're feeling stressed or down, your brain naturally wants to protect your mood, right? So it shifts you into a reward-seeking state. Let's say you're on a strict diet and you eat a cookie. You feel terrible guilt. That stress makes your brain seek comfort, which points you right back to the very thing that caused the guilt in the first place. You just throw your hands up and say, what the hell, I already blew it, I might as well eat the whole box. It becomes this really vicious cycle of indulgence, regret, and then even greater indulgence.
So, the crucial takeaway here is this massive myth buster. Guilt actually makes your self-control worse. We all tend to think that being hard on ourselves is what keeps us in line, but guilt is heavily associated with far less motivation. Surprisingly, the science shows that self-forgiveness is what actually increases your accountability. By simply forgiving yourself immediately after a failure, you remove that heavy emotional pain and shame that drives further indulgence. You completely neutralize the what the hell effect.
Let's bring it home with Section 5, Strategies for Lasting Success and Rewiring the Brain for Discipline.
So how do we actively rewire the brain for discipline using everything we've just learned? Well, one of the biggest hurdles is actually how we perceive time itself. Present you is heavily biased toward instant gratification, which is a phenomenon psychologists call delay discounting. Future you, on the other hand, is someone you idealize. We just sort of assume future you is going to have way more time, way more energy, and literally infinite willpower. But because we treat future you almost like a total stranger, we completely disconnect from the long-term consequences of our choices today. To build a mental shield against instant gratification, you have to actively and vividly imagine your future self. Building this future self continuity makes you dramatically more likely to make good choices right now.
Furthermore, you gotta remember that your mental muscle relies heavily on a concrete physical foundation. If you're getting less than 6 hours of sleep a night, you are chronically draining your willpower reserve. Conversely, just 15 minutes of exercise a day boosts your heart rate variability, which happens to be a prime biological indicator of your capacity for self-control. And finally, you really have to monitor your environment. Willpower is contagious. It's a thing called goal contagion. If you surround yourself with peers who are engaging in bad habits, or honestly, even if you just see someone breaking a rule, your brain unconsciously mimics them, and your own self-control just deteriorates.
So let's look at 3 super actionable steps to train your willpower muscle over time. Number 1, meditate for just 5 minutes daily. Seriously, you don't even have to be good at it. Just the sheer act of noticing your mind wandering trains that essential pause before acting circuitry in your brain. Number 2, practice self-forgiveness the exact moment you experience a setback, stopping that what the hell cycle dead in its tracks. And number 3, actively connect with your future self to bridge that delayed discounting gap we talked about.
We've seen how our physical muscle cells retain myonuclei to remember past strength, how our very DNA holds an epigenetic memory of intense exercise, and how our willpower can be trained, depleted, and completely rebuilt just like physical tissue. So knowing that your physical and mental muscles are exquisitely built to remember the effort you put in, what will you commit to doing differently today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.